speaker, Danny M. from Los Angeles.
Seriously. Had I known, I would have kept my hair long. My name is Danny Marsh. I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Scott for putting me on the 101 on a Saturday night driving north, because nothing really could cause more resentments than that. So I'm just here to share that gift. It's an honor and a privilege to be anywhere in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank Marita and Michael for coming and hanging out. Michael is one of my oldest, longest-standing friends. He was my roommate when I got sober. We've known each other for 50 years. Wow. And Michael never threw me away. He never threw me away, and I'm so grateful that you didn't, because you gave me an opportunity to be here, and I love you. And if you're new, I'm sure you're thrilled for Michael and I. If you're new, I'm sure you're like sweating crystal meth out of your spinal fluid, going, no, but I'm happy for the Jew at the podium, really I am. Because when I was new and I heard you guys were having these big lives, my only hope was that you would leave the meeting and get hit by a bus. Because I got here really scared. I got here really scared, and I got here dying of alcoholism. And if you're new, welcome. If you're new and you hear nothing else tonight, hear this: you're safe. We need nothing from you here. You don't have to do jack. My prayer for you is that you try not to have a drink tonight and come back and hang out with us again tomorrow. And if you drink tonight, come back and hang out with us again tomorrow. Because I don't get surprised when we drink, I get surprised when we don't. I have sobriety date, it's April 24th, 1990. I have a home group. It's the Tuesday night solution group meeting. We meet on Zoom these days. I have a sponsor. He's a little garden gnome who lives in Jerusalem, Israel. His name is Yisrael C., and he knows he's my sponsor, and I talk to him with great regularity. And I'm just recovering from some kind of little bronchial thing, so if I cough up a lung while I'm talking, I apologize. I got a nasty case of alcoholism. So when I got sober in West Hollywood. And there was a guy named Bill Burns, and he used to say, if you don't tell us how you're really doing, we can't really help you. So I'm just going to tell you how I'm really doing. I've had a really rough couple of weeks work-wise. I'm a little scared. I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't know what some of the things that are going on in the world are causing me great concern, and I don't know how to navigate them. And I call my sponsor and we talk about it, and he said, let's just keep talking about it. Let's keep it all out on the table and treat it like a real piece of business. So I've got all that going on. 5 years ago this week, I was in Las Vegas at a trade show, and I got really uncomfortable, and like my jaw was tight and my chest was a little tight, and I didn't know what to do. And I came home and I felt the same way, and I got on my knees and I said, God, am I going to be okay? And the voice that came back was my gay Cuban AA brother, Vincent, that said, I got you, boo. So that's how God talks to me. God said, I got you, boo. So I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning. I was still uncomfortable. I called my doctor. My doctor said, get to the freaking hospital now. What I heard was take a shower and shave, relax, have breakfast, pack a bag, and make your way to St. Joe's. So I get to the hospital and they shoot up. I'm having something called sustained ventricular tachycardia, which they frown on. And they shot up my chest with a bunch of stuff, and I ended up in coronary care. And then they told me I needed a procedure where they were going to implant a defibrillator pacemaker in my chest. So they did the procedure. I got out of the procedure. I stopped breathing. I went into a coma for 3 days, and then the pandemic hit. So like, when I tell you I'm grateful to be here, I'm grateful to be anywhere. Here's the thing that happened in the middle of all that. I was sponsoring a new guy. He got sober like 30 days before I went into the hospital. And when I got out of the coma, he was in the hospital waiting, and he said, "Thank you." And I said, "Thank you?" He said, "Yeah, while you were in that coma, John texted me, and John texted me, and Lisa texted me. And so I want to thank you for having them all text me while you were out." And I'm like, dude, I was in a coma. Like, I wasn't texting behind your back. I didn't do this for you. And he had that moment. He had that fire-starting moment where he knew he was placed in a position of neutrality in Alcoholics Anonymous, safe and protected. And most of the guys I sponsor, I don't have to have that dramatic an effect with, but if that was the byproduct, I'm okay with that. So I drank, right? I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. That didn't cause my alcoholism. It gave me an affinity for snorting Mini Cross Whites, but it didn't cause my alcoholism. And I come from a really lovely family. I had a mom and a dad and a brother and a little baby sister, and I was afforded every opportunity a kid could have growing up. And I hear all kinds of horror stories and scary stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's not mine. And when I first heard those stories, I thought, oh my God, another place I don't fit in. But so I come from this lovely family, and I was a, Little League player, and I was all of this stuff, and I was never a part of, and I never fit in. And I always thought that you guys had a set of skills and a set of tools that I didn't have, and there was no way for me to get to where you were from where I was. So I was an uncomfortable kid, and I was awkward, and I was this chubby little freckle-faced kid, and then my grandfather was a rabbi in Hollywood, and he had invited 1,800 of his congregants to come watch the prodigal grandson become a bar mitzvah. And that morning, I discovered alcohol. And it produced that sense of ease and comfort that we all talk about. So I drank that morning. I threw up on the pulpit. I almost didn't make it through the Torah ceremony. And then when we had a party at my house that night, I drank, I threw up, I drank, I threw up. I embarrassed my grandparents and my parents and everybody there who wanted to watch me succeed. And if you're between me and the drink, I'll kill you to get to the drink. Nothing stands between me and the drink. And the next morning I woke up, and a normal person would have thought, oh my God, what did I do? Like, what happened? I got up and thought, oh my God, I cannot wait to do this again. Because it was the first time in my life I got comfortable in my skin. And I drank like that from the gate. And then I got introduced to pot. I hated pot. Hated it. I smoked it every day for a decade. I hated every minute of it. And I talk a lot about drugs. I'm sorry if the talk about drugs offends anybody. I get confused in Alcoholics Anonymous a lot, where they say drugs are outside issues. And then I read our founder's stories, right? Bill's story, on page 6 of his story, he can't stop drinking, goes to a doctor, gives him a sedative, and the next day Bill's taking both gin and sedative. And Dr. Bob talks about taking pills in the morning to calm his jitters so that he can make it through the day without drinking. And I thought if good drugs were good enough for our founders, they were good enough for me. And giddy up, I did. I used to take anything that said, do not operate heavy machinery. And it wasn't until I was 2 years sober that I realized I was stealing antibiotics from my grandmother. And I never got high, but I never got sick. It seemed to work really, really well. But it was all very confusing to me. And then I got introduced to cocaine. And that was a big mistake. It was a big mistake. And this could date me a little bit, but my first purchase was a dime bag of cocaine, and I did it all in one line. And I had it fronted to me, and then I refused to pay the dealer. And we got into a fight in the quad at Grant High School, and my buddy Amo put him in a trash can and said, "Leave Danny alone." And that was my introduction to cocaine. And it didn't get much better. Like, it didn't. It progressed, but it didn't get much better. My high school graduation weekend, my friend Artie Simon had a cabin up in Lake Arrowhead, and he invited me to come up to the cabin and said, "We'll each buy an 8-ball and we'll do it over high school graduation weekend." So I did mine on the drive up, and and then I spent the weekend helping him find his. And he called me a year later. I mean, we hung out, but he called me a year later and said, "Dude, it's the 1-year anniversary of our high school graduation. Let's go back to Arrowhead." I said, "Great." He goes, "I still have some of that blow left." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what is wrong with you?" You know, I wasn't the problem, he was the problem. Happy birthday to the birthday people. Maggie, thank you for a great 10-minute talk. Like, if you're new, you heard everything you needed to hear in Maggie's 10-minute talk. I'm going to say the same thing she said. I'm just going to say it slower and longer. Much. And really, thank you so much for starting the 90-minute meeting my time here, so that half of you, or half of you less 3 who voted the majority, can get really pissed off at me. Like, you're going, "What the hell? Why is this guy still going? It's 9 o'clock, 8:30, we're out." But yep, I get the first hour and a half meeting. And you're going to remember me for that. Because I'm going to drag it out. So I'm smoking pot and I'm doing cocaine and I'm taking anything that I can. I used to like to take Tuinals and drive my car. That was a treat. I remember playing bumper cars with my car one night, and I'm a guy that should be dead, and I'm not. I'm a guy that should be dead, and I'm not. And so what happened is I barely made it out of high school. I was gone for the afternoon with a friend of ours, Corrine, and I came back to find out that my little brother had died in a mountain climbing accident. And 3 weeks later, I was taking a walk with my dad at LA Valley College, and he dropped dead of a heart attack. And it sucked. Like, it really, and it shaped everything. It shaped and changed everything I had known as a little kid growing up. That sense of safety and security and comfort and understanding that I had growing up. I went to the rabbi at the time and I said, "How do I reconcile this? How do I deal with this?" And he said, "I shake my fist at God." And I said, "That's not enough. There is no connective tissue there. There is nothing to give me comfort in that." And I crawled back into a bottle of Jack Daniels because that's what I like to drink. And I developed a drink. It was Jack Daniels and peppermint schnapps on the rocks. Seriously? Like, you guys are shooting heroin with dirty toilet water and you're judging my cocktail? Like, I get sober and virginal at the same time. I love the hypocrisy of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys are so my people. And my 23-year-old will tell you that I judge her for everything I did when I was 23. So it's a consistent thread. So I'm drinking this drink. I go to college in San Francisco. Let's be more realistic. I enrolled in college in San Francisco. I chased her. She didn't really want me there. She dumped me after a couple of weeks. I ended up back in LA, and I was in a little apartment in Toluca Lake, California. And I had a grandfather who was a Russian immigrant. He came to this country with nothing, zero, not the rabbi, my other grandpa. He landed in Ellis Island at 18 years old, didn't know the language, didn't know what he was going to do for work, and went to school and learned the language and built a life for himself, and then built a better life for his kids and his grandkids than the one he had been given. And I was too loaded to go to the hospital the night he had a heart attack. I was almost too loaded to make it to the funeral. But when they were handing out those little checks, I was first in line, because that's the guy I had become. And I like to date by the hour. So I took that money and I put it in the bank, and I called an escort service, and she brought a freebase pipe, and she stayed for 6 months. And I don't know about the rest of you men in this room, but my first thought when I ingest freebase cocaine is long-term Neanderthal sexual relations. Unfortunately, the last thing that's humanly possible is for me to be an active participant. So if you can picture the short, fat, mulleted Jew waddling around his apartment with his underwear around his ankles, chasing a sex worker for 6 months, getting absolutely nowhere. And I hadn't heard the term pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I thought they were normal dating rituals. Michael wasn't having that same experience, but I didn't know that. And what happened for me is my grandpa, who spent his entire life building a better life for me, I smoked it up with a sex worker in 6 months. And if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know what that black hole of shame is that you got. I don't know what that cancer of the soul is that you're unwilling to separate yourself from. But that was the one that was going to take me to the grave before drugs and alcohol did. I was going to die of shame before I died of alcoholism. And what happened for me is that I got asked to leave that apartment by the U.S. Marshals. They were not the moving company I had hoped, but my landlord wanted rent and I had none, and I ended up in a little apartment in West Hollywood with my friend Michael. And one night I was doubled over in a whole bunch of pain, and I went to Cedars-Sinai emergency room, and they gave me a shot of Demerol, and they said, whatever you do, don't drink. And by that point, I was drinking 2/5 of Thrifty Blue Brand vodka in my bed every day. And so I went home and I drank. And here's where I started. By that point, I was drinking all night. I'd get up in the morning, I'd brush my tongue, I'd throw up the vodka from the night before, I'd crawl back into bed, I would drink whatever was left of the vodka, I would turn on a Highway to Heaven rerun, and then see where my day went from there. I used all my sick days by January 3rd. But here's where I start to understand how the disease of alcoholism manifests itself in me. Maggie talked about being special and being different. I believe because of what I went through in my life that I played by a different set of rules than anybody else on the planet. And whatever you citizens have to adhere to, I'm a little different, and I'm a little special, and I'm an incredible opportunist, and I got away with a lot of stuff behind a lot of behavior because people wanted to believe in me. And I went to the doctor that morning. I drank all morning, went to the doctor. I knew he was going to draw blood, and I was convinced to my innermost self that he would not find alcohol in my system. Convinced. And he drew the blood, and he came back, and he said, "Do you drink?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I have a glass of wine a night like anybody else." And he said, "It's noon, you have a 0.25 blood alcohol level. You also have a distended liver, and I'd like to check you into the hospital to detoxify your liver." And as they were checking me into the hospital, the detox from alcohol was too hard for my heart to handle, so I had an atrial fibrillation of my heart, and I ended up in coronary care for 3 days. And they were detoxing me. One of the things they were detoxing me with was a drug called Ativan, which I really liked. It took the edge off. Did I mention that I really liked it a lot? I would have taken one on the drive up tonight, but I thought Scott may frown on that. And then they said it was a candidate for the chemical dependency unit, whatever that was. But they were giving me Ativan, so I said yes. And they thought it would be fun to watch the Jew play volleyball on Ativan. So I broke my ankle in 2 places. And then they said, we're going to a place called the Log Cabin. And I thought, cool, pancakes. I can do Alcoholics Anonymous. And I put on my best out. You got to understand, I was the same height that I am. I had the San Fernando Valley crystal meth speed drummer's mullet. I had a huge bushy beard. I weighed 245 pounds. I put on a purple and gold striped shirt and gold MC Hammer harem pants, and they wheeled me down Beverly Boulevard and up Robertson Avenue in that wheelchair at 7 o'clock in the morning. How you guys knew I was a newcomer, I have no idea. But, you know, here's some coffee, keep coming back, and all I thought was leave me alone. All I thought was leave me alone. And I went back to the hospital that night, and I wrote two things in a piece of paper. One, walked into a meeting filled with a whole lot of people a whole lot sicker than I am, because I'm a little special. And two, walked into a meeting filled with a whole lot of people a whole lot more willing to get well than I am. And in that moment, I knew Alcoholics Anonymous couldn't work for me. In that moment, one more time, I was late to the party. You guys had a skill set that I didn't possess, and this can't work. And so I did 30 days in that hospital, and I was a model patient. I'm an incredible opportunist, and I can lie with the best of them. And I told them exactly what I thought they needed to hear to get off my case. And at the 30th day, we had this coining ceremony. It was beautiful. Passed a coin around. Danny, we love you. Danny, you'll be president of AA someday. Danny, you're an amazing human. And I put the coin in my pocket, and I got in my car, and I went to Lee's liquor store, and I picked up a fifth of vodka, and I went home, and I started drinking. And it talks about me very specifically in our literature. The difference between the heavy drinker and the alcoholic is the heavy drinker, given sufficient reason to stop, stops. I had a distended liver and atrial fibrillation on my heart. I was told if I drink, I can die, and I cannot stop drinking. I cannot replace that cycle of spree and remorse with the cycle of surrender and commitment left to my own devices, no matter what. And Michael was my roommate at the time, and I'll never forget. And I think I have the story right, but you know, it was April 22nd. It was Earth Day. He was out with, I think it was Claparta. He was out with a friend. Came back, we ordered Indian food. I passed out in a plate of Indian food in our living room. He looked at his friend and said, "Oh, that's not normal, right? That's not good." And on April 23rd, 1990, I was standing on the front porch of my house with a half-drunk bottle of vodka in an overnight bag on my crutches, waiting for my mom and baby sister to take me back to the hospital. And that look of pain and fear and sadness and terror and disgust and uncertainty that I saw in their eyes in that moment, I haven't had to see in anyone's eyes in almost 35 years. And if that's as good as Alcoholics Anonymous gets, I can't pay you back in lifetimes. So when Scott says, "Can you come and talk?" you bet your ass I can. Because I've got two actions in my life today. I'm walking towards a drink or away from a drink. And the more actions I take walking away from a drink, the greater the opportunity I have to live a life that I was ill-equipped to live when I got here. And what happened for me is I started getting busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. His name was Bob Braithwaite. He was lovely. He never worked a step. I never worked a step. We were perfect together. But I used to call him every morning and say, "Hi, Bob, it's Danny." He said, "Hi, Danny. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I love you. Call me tomorrow." And he made AA a safe landing spot for me. Because if he were trying to tough love me or beat me up or bully me, I was out of here. No one could be harder on me than I was on myself. No one could be meaner to me than I was on myself. And if you were trying to out-mean me, I was gone. And then, you know, after 6 months, I got a sponsor who was a lovely man, and we worked the steps. And when we got to the 9th step, I went to the cemetery to make amends to my dad and my brother and my grandpa. And I sat and we had this talk, and it was lovely, but it felt light. And you told me for this to have any lasting effect, it must have depth and weight. And I didn't. So one more time, I can't even make amends right. And I come back to my home group and I say, "I'm a loser again. I can't even do this." And you said the kindest thing, which was just show up, do your job in Alcoholics Anonymous, and trust the process. So I got sober in West Hollywood when AIDS was really rampant, and my sponsor, Bob, got really sick with AIDS, and I used to go to the hospital and hold his hand and wipe his forehead and kiss his cheek, and I didn't do it because I'm a good guy. I'm not a good guy. I'm not. I'm a runner. I'm not a stayer. But what happened for me is when Bob passed away, I spoke at his funeral, and I sat down afterwards, and I was a little cleaner with my dad. And I was a little cleaner with my brother. I was a little cleaner with my grandpa. So I just kept showing up and doing my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you can imagine, the mullet and the harem pants, not a lot of dating. I know it's shocking, but there was not a lot of action. And I'm a stalker by nature. That's one of my few dating skills is stalking. And stalking and snubbing. That's really what I got. So I stalked this woman at my morning meeting. Michael met her at a party. He said to me, she's a keeper. And I'm like, yeah, I got no shot here. But she was a hairdresser, and I had a mullet. And I didn't know how to ask somebody out, but I figured if I made a hair appointment in 1 hour of uninterrupted time, I could con her into going out with me. So I did that. We had the perfect AA date. It was a Monday night. The stars were out and the moon was full, and I knew like 30 minutes into this deal that she was mine forever. And she may not have even known my name. It didn't matter because I was taking her down. And the next morning I put cards on her doorstep and flowers on her car, and I called her 30 or 40 times to make sure she hadn't forgotten about me. And the next morning I did the same thing. And on Thursday she dumped me because I was freaking insane. Like I had never done a sexual inventory. I didn't know how to be a sober adult dating man. I was nuts. And what happened is she got busy in AA and I got busy in AA, and we started going out again after a while. And then we ended up moving in together. And right after we moved in together, she said, and I quote, "Honey, I'm going to go to Hawaii with my friend Tony." I heard, "Honey, I'm going to go to Hawaii and have sex with everyone in the state except you." So I freaked out, and I called my sponsor at the time, and I said, "What do I do?" He said, "I'm going to tell you exactly what we do." I said, "Great, I need direction." He said, "You didn't get sober to be treated that way. You didn't get sober to be punished like that. I want you to march home and tell her she's got a choice. Either you or Hawaii, she can't have both. And if she chooses Hawaii, you pack her bags and you throw her ass out on the street." And I thought, okay, it's a little harsh, but I want to be that good AA soldier. So I marched home. Thank God she was at work. Thank God. And I opened the big book to page 69 where it says now about sex. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. Counsel with others is often helpful, but we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. And 7 pages prior to that in the book, it said, this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God, which in those 2 spaces tell me that I don't have the right to take away you having the dignity of your own experience. I have one job, and that's to share with you my experience. And trust that if I have a power greater than myself that's separating me from a drink, you have a power greater than yourself that's separating you, and it's not me. So I called a man named Scott Redmond that I had heard talk in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, I need help. And he said, in the most beautiful voice I've ever heard, "Honey, I can help you." And I knew that I was safe. And he invited me over to his house. He invited me over to his house, and we opened the big book, to chapter 5. And when we got to the 3rd step prayer, he did the kindest thing that anyone's ever done with me, is we got on our knees, we held hands, and we read the 3rd step prayer with one another. He didn't pray it at me. It wasn't a sponsor to a sponsee or a baby to a whatever. It was one alcoholic holding hands with another alcoholic, inviting God into the solution. And then he launched me on a course of vigorous action, introduced me to the inventory process that is my fulcrum for change. Resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct. the three areas of my life where alcoholism presents itself the most, where if I treat it like a real piece of business in front of me at all times, I have an opportunity to grow and change in a way that I was unequipped to do before. Resentment's the number one offender. It has the power to actually kill. These resentments must be mastered, but how? I couldn't wish them away any more than I could alcohol. And my favorite part of that is the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, which means it didn't have to happen. I just had to think it happened. And I have tremendous mind. I can read your mind behind your back like nobody's business. And I get resentful all the time because I got alcoholism, right? You don't tell me that I will not get resentful. You'll tell me what to do when I get resentful. So let's say this is a stretch, but let's say I'm resentful at my wife. It's a stretch, but let's say the cause, she said good morning, but I know what she meant. I know what she meant. She meant, you're a loser. When are you going to do this? Why haven't you done this? So I'm resentful at my wife. The cause, she said good morning. What does it affect in me, right? We disregard the other person entirely. It affects my self-esteem because I'm married beneath me. It affects my, you think I'm making this up. I read this a month ago to my sponsor. It affects my pocketbook because I've wasted way too much money on this woman. It affects my ambition because it makes me want to be less of a good husband. It affects my personal relations because I'm willing to assassinate her character to anybody that will listen. And it affects my sex relations because I start withholding all of this from her. And all she said was good morning, but I got alcoholism, right? But you tell me what to do with that information is I ask, what are my key defects of character that if God were to remove, the resentment would be lifted? I'd like my wife lifted, but what I need is the resentment lifted. I'm punitive, I'm retaliatory, I'm judgmental, I'm angry, I've got false pride, I'm sober longer than she is, and I do A, much better than she does, and I'm a little closer to God than she is, so there could be a little spiritual pride in there. So I got all of this stuff going on, right? I got all these defects at work, and all she said was good morning, but I got alcoholism. And thank God you gave me a treatment for what ails me. Thank God you told me that if I treat that like a real piece of business, I don't have to punish my wife for my alcoholism. And then the fear part of the inventory, so that little apartment in Toluca Lake that I got asked to leave by the U.S. Marshals, for 14 years I tried to track down the landlord. And every time I drove past that house, I could not find the landlord's phone number, and it was like a little knife in my heart. And I finally found her the week before my daughter was born. And I called her up and I said, hi, my name's Danny Marsh. I'm sure you don't remember me. She said, oh, I remember you. And I said, listen, I treated your property with tremendous disrespect, and I was a really irresponsible tenant. And I don't comport myself that way today that I did when I was your tenant. And she started crying, and I started crying. We had this really lovely connection. And then I made that mistake, that big fatal mistake. I may owe you a little money. And she threw out this staggering sum of money, staggering. And I really wanted to say, but we just had this spiritual connection. But I did what you told me to do. I did what you told me to do. And I wrote her a series of post-dated checks, dated till I'm about 106. And she said, that's great. And I mailed them all to her, and she cashed them all the day we were going into the hospital to deliver my kid. So we're in the labor and delivery room, and I'm in the hallway, and I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death. And you told me what to do with fear. We put it down on paper. We asked God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. So I'm afraid I'm going to be an abusive father. I'm afraid I'm going to be a horrible dad. I'm afraid I can't afford to be a dad. I'm afraid I'm going to drop this unborn child from the changing table. I'm afraid I'm going to run. I'm afraid of all this stuff. And I called Scott at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I read him that fear inventory. And I got on my knees and said, dear God, please remove my fear of being an abusive dad and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And I can tell you 23 years into this deal, I'm a great freaking dad. I am a great freaking dad because I don't punish my kid for my alcoholism. And then the sexual part of the inventory. Where am I selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Everywhere. Do I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Only if I open my mouth. Who did I hurt? I hurt you. I hurt me. There may have been livestock. I don't remember everything. And where was I at fault? You know, I love the big book because it says we treat sex like we would any other problem, right? Not special, neither to be despised, nor loathed, nor treated lightly. So where was I at fault? What are my defects that at work here that are just at work like they're at work everywhere else? I'm selfish, I'm self-centered, I'm self-seeking, I'm grandiose, I'm dishonest, I'm sneaky, all of that stuff. And then the most beautiful part of the sexual inventory is what should I have done instead? Which tells me who's the sober adult married man that I want to be. And the bottom of page 69, it says, in this way, we help shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. The right answers will come if we want them. So all of a sudden, I came here not believing in a power greater than myself, and you introduced me to this inventory process that now I have resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct all on a piece of paper, which is for me the platform with which to start to engage a relationship with power that I did not believe in when I got here. And it wasn't until I was a few years sober that I realized on April 23rd, 1990, I could not stop drinking. And on April 24th, 1990, the drink problem had been removed. Without any thought or effort on my part, it just had. And what I know now that I didn't know then, and I couldn't know then, is that was the beginning of the experience of the touch of the Master's hand. Because left to my own devices, there was no way I could stop drinking. And so 5 years ago when I had this health thing, they told me that once a week I have to take an oral chemotherapy because it reduces some inflammation in my heart. And it freaked me out. Like I was scared to death that I was going to get sick. And I called my sponsor at the time and I said, what do? I'm scared to death and I got to take this medication. And he said, I'm going to suggest you do a meditation on the medication. Do a breathing exercise, breathe in. And I'm like, a meditation? You don't understand, I'm scared. And he said, just try the meditation. So I thought, I need a new sponsor because this can't work. And every Sunday night for 5 years, I thank God for creating a medication that is saving my life. I invite it in to do its job, and then I invite it out. And then I got Yisrael as the sponsor, and I was having some problems with my kid, and I got really scared. And I called him up and I said, what do? He said, well, let's pray. And I thought, oh my God, I need another new sponsor. Like this can't work for me either. So it keeps turning out that the answer to everything is prayer and meditation. And if I start on my knees and say, Pop, I need help, I have an opportunity to change. And I'll never forget my daughter. So I love my kid. Michael's got a kid the same age. And she was 16. She had just come home I had just come home from work on a Saturday afternoon, and she wasn't home. She was out with her friend Hattie. Hattie had just gotten her license, and Ruby had just gotten her permit, and they came home, and Hattie was out driving. Now, I know I go from being a kind, loving, sweet, generous, caring father to a member of the California Highway Patrol, like that. So she came home and I laid into her. I said, babe, you know you're not allowed to drive with someone who just got a license. You can lose your permit, you can lose your insurance. It's illegal for you. Now, what I failed to mention is that my daughter was a nationally ranked debater. So I don't have a shot, right? I'm done. So while I'm yelling at her, she's texting me 4 articles contrary to everything I've just said. So, it's okay. It's okay. You're safe. So contrary to everything I had just said, so what happens for me, I don't know if it happens for you, is that when I get scared or when I get hurt, my first reaction is to hurt you more. Like, I'm not going down alone. So I looked at her and I said, babe, I got to tell you, I am so disappointed in your behavior. I'm thoroughly disappointed in your thought process, and I'm thoroughly disappointed by what you did. And my wife jumped in and said, you know what, you can talk to our kid about anything, anytime, any way, but you can't do that. That is unfair. So I stopped for a moment and I thought, one bullet will take them both out. Because that's my reaction, right? But I paused when agitated or doubtful. And I went outside and I took a breath and I said, Pop, who am I supposed to be here? And I walked back in and I looked at my kid and I said, Pumpkin, I got to tell you, I've never been the dad of a 16-year-old before, and I'm scared. And I've never watched someone grow up like that. And but here's what I will promise you, is I will do everything in my power to never punish you for my fear again. And you know, so you guys have given me the opportunity not to live like a saint, but to you know, to navigate the planet in a kind and gentle and loving way. And I'll tell this story and I'll sit down and shut up. When Ruby was probably 6 years old, we had had this goldfish named Edie the goldfish. And she was with Ruby her whole life. And I came home from work and Edie was dead. And I had to tell my kid, because when I was growing up, we had a family pet. My mom didn't tell me for a decade that the dog had died. So I didn't want to be that dad. So I walked in, I said, Pumpkin, I got some really sad news. Edie's dead. She goes, oh, that's so sad. I said, what should we do? And she thought for a minute and she said, you know what, Pop? We should take her back to the ocean and release her back to her family. And I thought, oh my God, that's so sweet. But we live in the valley and it's 8 o'clock at night and I want to be a good dad, but not a great dad. I said, so can you come up with something else? And she said, yeah, Pop, we can flush her down the toilet. Eventually she'll end up in the ocean. I love my kid. So Cindy, my wife, grabs Ruby. I grab the fish. I plop her in the tank. And I say, Pumpkin, is there anything you want to say before we say goodbye? And she said, and I quote, Dear God, thank you for allowing Edie to be with our family this long. Now please gently take her home to hers. 14 years ago, Scott's dying of liver cancer in the hospital, and 9 years ago, my mom's dying of heart failure. And I'm a runner. I am not a stayer. I do not have the equipment to navigate this. And I'm holding Scott's hand, and I'm wiping his forehead, and I'm kissing his cheek, and I'm holding my mom. And the only thing that pops into my head is Ruby's prayer. Dear God, thank you for allowing me to have Scotty this long. Now please gently take him home. Dear God, thank you for allowing me to have a mom this long. Now please gently take her home. And what happens for me is if I don't treat my alcoholism like a real piece of business right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, I miss the whole thing. And I'm unwilling to allow alcoholism to let me miss anything. So if you're new, I want to welcome you. I don't know what it is you're bringing to us. I don't know what it is you got. But I promise you, if you treat your alcoholism in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't have to miss anything ever. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome home.